The big news in Washington this week is that Hillary Clinton has some competition. Bernie Sanders is a senator from Vermont, a self-described Democratic socialist whose views are decidedly to the left of Secretary Clinton. He's announced he's running for the Democratic nomination for president, a move that drew cheers from progressives. Well, Arise News senior political analyst James Carville joins us on the phone from Las Vegas. James, it's reported that in just 24 hours of his announcement, Sanders had already raised $1.5 million. What does that signal, in your opinion?
Well, I think that there's a certain part of the Democratic Party that does want someone who's very progressive, like Senator Bernie Sanders, to run. And I think that he'll cause a significant impact on the race in a sense. Now, what we can't do is equate that to the effect of, say, the Tea Party and the Republican Party. That really progressive wing of the Democratic Party is not near as large as the Tea Party is in the Republican Party. So I suspect that he'll get a lot of attention here in the coming months. He won't be the nominee, but he will get a lot of attention, and he's a pretty kind of clever guy.
Well, perhaps so, James. But I mean, the $1.5 billion, I guess that's pretty good. But I mean, Ted Cruz raised about $31 million, a much bigger war chest. I guess the question is, a lot of people don't know who Bernie Sanders is around the country. What is he going to do with this war chest to gain some recognition and notoriety?
Well, I think wherever he goes, that he will get a lot of attention and notoriety, if you will. I think he has a small but very deep reservoir of support, and I think that he's speaking to something that a group of people that says, look, the major parties are leaving you out of the equation here, and I speak to the unresolved issues that you face every day in your life. I think there are some people who are receptive to that. How many, I'm quite skeptical, but he'll raise money, and particularly in small amounts. He's not going to have a very elaborate, very expensive campaign. It'll kind of live off the ground, if you will. But I think he'll get some coverage, and he'll have some interesting things to say between now and the time the nomination is secured.
Well, I'm sure he'll probably have a lot of interesting things to say, of course. But I guess the question is, does he really think he can win, especially against Hillary Clinton, who has a large war chest, and her polls are still very strong, James?
Right. I think it's fair to say that there are some people that run for president other than the reason to be president. I think that Senator Sanders pretty much knows that he's not going to be the nominee. He's not going to be president, but I think his goal is to say some things that he thinks to the country that he thinks that need to be said. And in doing that, his hope that he'll push the campaign further in his direction. I think that's pretty clearly what he's trying to accomplish in this.
Right. We call that, when I used to run track, they had a guy out there called the Rabbit. He'd run ahead of everybody else to keep the pace, so that the top guns there would probably either, burn themselves out ahead of time.
In the Kentucky Derby, the Rabbit didn't run fast enough yesterday. So, you're exactly, that's a good way to put it. But the Rabbit can cause the horses behind it, or the runners behind it, to run too fast early, and they run out of steam.
Look, I wanted to switch gears for a second here and talk about the Republicans. The latest news, of course, as you know, is, of course, the Bridgegate Chris Christie. The indictments that came down with that, I think it was the deputy chief of staff, two other people there, and, of course, one pled guilty. And Christie comes out and says this proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that he had nothing to do with it. But I think there are other folks that would say otherwise. What do you say?
I'll be honest with you, we've discussed this before. He never had a chance before this. Mm-hmm. So if you have something that has zero chance, and then something happens to reduce whatever chance there was, you can't reduce zero to any more than zero. Now, look, is this thing hugely embarrassing, and it's almost comical what they did. He wasn't going to be their nominee without Bridgegate. He's not going to be their nominee with Bridgegate. It's just not going to happen. But yes, it is an embarrassing story. And no, he's not going to be the nominee. He's not part of the equation.
I agree with you there, James. I don't think he is or ever was part of this equation. I think there was a lot of hot air to begin with all that. But given that being the case here, we are now not far away from 2016. We're starting to see some people come out of the woodworks and say they're going to be candidates. Now, of course, Bernie for the Democrats outside of Hillary. You've got Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. Who else do you see on the horizon? I guess the most important question is here, with Hillary's polls still very strong. Who do you think can really challenge her at this particular point in time?
Well, it's got to be somebody that wins a lot of primaries on the Republican side. And there's really one big question, and that is, do you think the Republicans are going to nominate Jeb Bush? If they don't, then everything kind of falls apart, and you don't know what happens. They have other chaos over there. If you believe that they do, and he wins a lot of primaries, he looks strong, and he looks like he's principled, then he could be a very strong general election candidate if all of that happens. The way I explain it to people, it's a little bit like a vet trying to give a dog a pill. The dog keeps spitting the pill up. These Republicans don't want to swallow Jeb Bush's pill. Now, whether or not they get it down between now and this time next year, we'll have to wait and see. But it's going to be an interesting cycle for them.
Well, it must be. A last question for you here. Right now, so far with this race, it seems like kind of a bland field. What are the hot button issues? Do you think the death penalty and gay marriage are going to be hot button issues in this upcoming election?
You know, honestly, I've coined the phrase, it's probably the most well-known phrase in modern American politics, it's the economy, stupid. And at the end of the day, that generally is the thing that dominates presidential elections in the United States. Now, for some reason that the economy has got such a level of satisfaction that people are discussing something else, and that probably bodes well for the Democrats. But I think that the economic issues tend to always have more influence on presidential elections than anything else. And I suspect that'll be true in this election.
Right. Well, gas prices are going up. The economy is certainly front and center. And we're going to have a good time, James, talking about this all the way up and through 2016.
Oh, yeah.
My friend.
I'm going to see you again pretty soon, too. I always look forward to it.
You got it.
That's 10-minute discussion on Sunday morning, anywhere in the world.
James Carville, you're so kind. Thank you so much for that.